Hello, everyone. My name is Rose Simpson. I'm a librarian at the New Haven Free Public Library, and welcome to Co-Create. We are here with Nadine Nelson, our creative in residence, and our special guest today is Lani Asuncion. Yes.
Yes. Hi.
So thank you for joining us today. Would you two like to introduce yourselves?
Right, I will introduce myself and I'll let Lani introduce herself. I have everyone introduce themselves, but I do talk about how usually we're connected or something. So I'm Nadine Nelson. I am the creative in residence this year, and I am the chef, owner, and educator of Global Local Gourmet, which is a culinary education company, and we specialize in experiential events and workshops and cooking classes. Have a lot of programs planned for February. We have a very packed February, very excited. And so I'll talk about that at the end. So I know Lani from Art Space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lani worked at Art Space and
10 years ago?
Yeah. So it is New Haven's largest nonprofit gallery, and it specializes in contemporary art and a lot of things on paper and community place-based work. So I've done a bunch of different things there, and I always enjoy going to their shows and participating in their programs. And so we met, and you can say how you came to New Haven, and you have this wonderful, beautiful background, places that we want to be right now.
Well, I've actually traveled into another state, but I was in New Haven for about, it was 10 plus years because I went to UConn for my MFA. And then I worked at Art Space. It was in 2016. I was helping with the citywide open studios. So kind of organizing and running that year's Citywide Open Studios. And if you all know Citywide Open Studios, it's pretty vast. There's a lot going on. And then we also was helping with the 30th year anniversary that they had during that time. And so, our space is 30 years plus. And so it was really cool to meet all the artists. And I worked with Nadine. We did the monster draw, and there was some stuff done at the Ely House, the contemporary Ely House. I know the name has shifted and changed. I know it way before that even happened. So it was really, it was really nice to be a working artist and have a studio near Rector Square. I miss that studio a lot. It was really cool. It's been cool also to see Nadine's work transition and what it's grown into, and just a busy bee, which we do have that in common. It's a lot of work to keep a practice going when it's it is global and it's going everywhere, and this background's moving, but so are we. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
I love the moving background. So tell us about your work, because you are interdisciplinary, or we say transdisciplinary, or artist. You do lots of different things.
Working in new media, doing a lot of performance, a lot of public performance work. That's something that now that I'm living in Boston, in Jamaica Plain, I have a working studio there, working studio. It's been really great to be there. It's on Green Street in Jamaica Plain.
Is it in the Armory?
No, this is one of the, I have an older building that's still around, and it has, it's really good studio space. So I work out of it right now, just like everybody else is working from home. But luckily it's set up in a way that I can do, some good work. So I've been extremely grateful for that. It's been great to get involved with the community there also. I'm doing work very soon, coming up with CCTV, the public access television in Cambridge, and also Starlight Stage, which is it'll be hosting some public performance stuff. It's amazing what they've done. They're in Cambridge, and they've turned a parking lot into a gigantic, beautiful performance space. So that's something that has already been happening this last year, and is going to continue to happen when the weather warms up a little bit more, because New England and all of its coldness. So that's some exciting stuff coming up. But I also run a collective. It's called Digital Soup. So that one's really fun, and it's been really exciting to meet other artists and create a space for BIPOC artists who are queer, allowing a safe haven for experimental work, but also to offer tech support and offer like technical technology, kind of a technical background and a technical stage, so that the artists can show up and just do their work and not have to worry about that part of things.
So talk more about that.
Yeah, sadly it was cut short, you know. For many reasons, the pandemic has been horrible, but that was really unfortunate because we had just kind of got going. The last one we did was at Black Mass in Chinatown, and that was well attended and it was really fun. We had about 11 artists, then plus a DJ, and other artists showing in the place. So we had like video, there was even VR. There was a VR room, experience room, by some artists that I had met at the museum school. And it was pretty cool. It was great to have local artists showing and to have performance and to have it respected, and then to have it supported, and also to work with local businesses like Black Math.
What kind of business is that?
It's a design firm.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a co-op building in Chinatown.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What I'm working on, so people know, is it's going to be boring today. It's just kind of behind the scenes work. So like right now I'm making a Pinterest board. So I'm a visual person. And for my events, it just helps so I have a series of cooking classes, paying cooking classes that I'm doing over Valentine's Day. And so I'm just organizing my thoughts and organizing myself visually to see like, okay, like what appetizers am I going to do?
Right.
And then after that, I have a program that I'm doing for the library next week on Pan-African cooking lab. And so we're going to be recipe testing. Mm-hmm. And so I want to set up boards on Pinterest for people to be able to see what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So because we're going to be also doing from ideating from the beginning of the recipe until like what it looks like plating. And so I want to show like, okay, these are different ways other people have done a particular dish. So how are we going to try and do it? You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like that. That's actually really cool. That's something that I'm actually trying to figure out right now, is how do I kind of here, let me see if I can bring this up. Like, how do I share the research, or how do I share? Because like when I did my talk at University of Dayton, there was a young person who had asked, well, how do I learn more about Hawaii? But what they were actually also asking was, how do I learn more about how you're framing it and like the research? And so it's kind of hard because, let me see if I can do this. I'm going to share this. Can we see it there? And so one of the things that always happens is like, it's easier for me to do a slide because it's all the frames are in order. And so it's like, one of the things that is always tricky is like, how do I share, how do I share work that's coming from multiple sources? And some of the stuff that I'm focusing on is like, kind of like generic Google searches. And then they become this like montage of historical references. If they be like, for this example, I'm showing you like, and it's really, there's one of the things that me and Nadine have in common. We do a lot of work around food and food politics and eco-tourism, but like eco and food. And there's a lot of that within like histories that we're thinking about. And I do a lot of work around Hawaii. My father and that side of the family, they were born and raised on a pineapple plantation. And so that's on Oahu, and that was in the 1920s. And so there's a lot of like research that I have been doing to try to figure out like, how do I talk about these histories, and what are they like, what are the actualities of things referenced in books, like the advertisements and whatnot. And Google is like this really big resource, but also eBay. It's been crazy because I've been finding a lot of like these this is 1935 dill pineapple juice ad, exotic. And like that's like the strangest thing to be like pineapple, exotic, and to search that on Google and for this to come up. And actually this one that we're looking at right now, that one has been hard to find. There was like this whole ad campaign that Dole did where they had this specific kind of like text and image, and they're pushing the designs in a really big way to try to sell the fruit and to try to get kind of like acknowledgement and more products sold overseas. So it's kind of interesting to also the whole thing of like price of an object and how what's the value of you know, something that was from the 1930s. But it's interesting how eBay has been that source.
It's amazing that someone clipped a random advertisement from what? That was from the 30s. So like, yeah. Let's see, 90 years ago. Right.
And it's interesting because there's even items like this, which I found on eBay, but it's a commemoration. It's kind of like a coin, a token. And it parallels with some work that I've been doing along these lines. Like I did a whole exhibit around this, but this was printed at about 6 feet, 6 feet tall. And we did a thing where it was printed the front and the back. It's interesting how, and the back is also printed. So the front of it is on one side of the wall. And if you walk around another side of the wall is the back. Oop. It's always funny how these like things go. And it was really interesting because this had all the information. Like I didn't need a wall text or a title, but it was like this item from eBay that contained these historical kind of relic. It's a historical relic, but it's also very kitschy. So that complication, you know, of research, of finding an objectness. So I like this idea of, like Nadine's saying, creating a Pinterest page, creating this kind of Pinterest, you know, place where they all fit, because it's like, how do you make those connections or those searches so people see what you're doing? And does that matter? Or are people just like, I don't want to see that. I don't know. But it seems like it does matter because people are asking. And there's interest in it because it's like, you know, it's a part of the work. So I find that really interesting.
I feel like a lot of people don't like, there's been a lot of controversy like in food writing about like appropriation of different recipes and how like, so there's, I don't know if you know Marcus Samuelson. He's like probably the most famous Black chef, like high-end chef. And so he is Ethiopian, but he was raised in Sweden and adopted in Sweden. So he has like that fine European food background, apprenticeship, all that kind of stuff. And then, but then, you know, he's come to America and he's connected to his African roots and, you know, Black food, and opened up like a restaurants in Harlem. And I think now he has one in Miami and stuff like that on Pan-African food. And so he was asked to write, I guess, a recipe for Bon Appetit or Food and Wine, one of those magazines. I think it was Bon Appetit, and which had a recent controversy, so many different controversies there, but that's neither here nor there. But so he made the soup. It's and it's a historical thing, because I like to transform food and do different things in food, like, but I do think that you have to have a sense of history. So that's what I do my boards and, you know, like notes, like, you know, that you need to know the foundation of something before you start changing it. But then when something has like such historical, it's a soup that they make, Haitians make on Independence Day. And so, and if you know any Haitian in Boston, you know, like, is very Haitian centric, you know, other than Miami, it has, and New York, it's, you know, probably the third largest
there. Right. A lot of,
you know,
really
so I mean, I understand that, you know, I went to school with a lot of Haitians and I know about that, but any Haitian that you meet, if you know about soup jamu, they're going to tell you the history. So then he made a blended soup and then he put candied nuts on it. So people said that he Karen'd the recipe, you know, and then it was like, okay, perhaps you shouldn't call it soup jamu. critique, or you should say like inspired by, but it was so far away from what the original was that, and so I said, I don't know, so other food writers like, do people not do research? And I'm like, when I have an assignment for food writing or anything, it's like I go and I research first. So like I know what other people have written and what's out there. So I just think that it's kind of funny, but I do think that I'm playing with learning how to present material. Like I'm learning timelines, like there's you can do historical timelines and then story maps, and then I've done maps on Google that I love, so
yeah, my partner has been helping me, who's like trained with historian ways, and there's like maps out there that could start pinning out some of this research, which would be visual, and I could then link to it through either a website or something like that. And it's now at the point where I'm just going to share some of the books that I'm reading right now. It's at the point where it's really important for me to share this, or at least people to know, because it's not just about what I'm finding, but it's about the whole dialogue, right? It's about like what conversations are being had around, like my research, but general research of like these different subjects, and the history of Hawaii is very specific. And my placement as being a Filipino American who, was partially raised in Hawaii, but also in Okinawa, Japan. And I spent a little time in Guam, and I was born in California. There's a lot of histories there, and there's a lot of complexities that even I have to research of like, how do I fit into this timeline, or how does the work fit into this timeline? And it's worth contextualizing that. It was so amazing during the holidays. There were so many good sales on books. I'm so happy that happened. And then trying to also support the presses that are publishing these works, because it's really important. I mean, it took me a really long time to find some of the information on things that you would think was so easy to access. And that's what's actually more disturbing sometimes when you start doing research on certain subjects, like what you find. Like I was telling Nadine before we had this meeting, we're kind of, doing a little catch up the other night, and it was great. And I was telling her how, like, I just found out from down the street around my house is where there's like a Dole family house. And so James Dole, who, opened up he did the whole plantation, he made the whole plantation in Hawaii. He was born in Jamaica Plain, where I have a studio right around the corner. And so how the histories parallel and how things, overlap, it can be, riveting to a personal aspect and to a whole larger whole, which is like, a country. And, we can keep going and going. Again, we have that history tree. And so it's like interesting to see the parallels, or even just to be like, whoa, like that's right by my house. So it's been an interesting exploration for sure.
Who's what is the company that does bananas?
I mean, there's a few. I know Dole has some, but it's like I don't know the history.
I
don't do the research on that. Sorry, I don't specialize.
Maybe you're thinking Chiquita?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah,
because red and white, right? Yeah. Being a visual learner, having dyslexia, it's so strange how like brains remember things too. So those timelines and those trees are important too, because sometimes I get all like just immersed, and I just like to one look at the roots or maybe the leaves, but we need to look at the whole tree. It's interesting too, coming at it from an art perspective, because I'm not trained as a historian. I'm not trained, even as like a librarian. There must be this whole, you learn how to do coding or cataloging, right? Like there's a whole system that basically you have to learn, which as artists we don't know. So it's kind of interesting to like come at it from a whole different angle.
Yep, can confirm as a librarian, there are classes on coding and cataloging, although you may or may not take them depending on which track you're going for. If you're looking for like children's services, you might not need to learn coding.
But it's that intricate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it really blows my mind. I respect that.
And isn't like a lot of like librarian like studies now, like new media and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I think that's really important too.
Yeah.
But the only
using databases, because there's so many now.
Well, the thing that I question though is like, Like, what is access, who gets access, and how many things get left out when they're being cataloged, you know, and how do things, because I remember when I was in grad school, I ended up with a whole bunch of film, like 16 millimeter film, because they were throwing it out in the dumpster.
Wow.
And I was just like, I wonder how they're backing some of that up. Is it just forgotten? Is it just lost?
So do you want to tell us about the pictures in the back now and like why, you know, how is that part of, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
and like the public sourcing and all that kind of stuff, because like a lot of people, you know, there's a woman that is fighting, I think, Harvard, and then, you know, Getty Images, that, you know, her family was enslaved, and, you know, they have her picture and they have the rights for her picture, and it's like, that's my family. And
yeah, so I really I would welcome the opportunity to talk to the person that I stole this from. Because I would love to have a conversation about ecotourism and like, why do they visit Hawaii, and why do they choose to do a drone video, and how do drone videos parallel military surveillance? How does it parallel the view from a plane? Why is it okay to visit Hawaii in a pandemic? Why are vacations more important than people's lives? These are all questions I would love, you know, we can talk about right now, which is really important to me. And it's like, it's interesting because I'm just showing you different pieces of the work that it comes from. And so this one here is like how it's installed. And so you can kind of see right behind me, there was just some of the view that's in the install. And I was trying to think about like, how do I reference what's happening right now? Like, how do I talk about like my frustrations, my anger, my sadness about my family being, you know, put in danger for people's vacations. And this is another video that I actually shot with the coin that we were just talking about that was bought off eBay. And it's this one is done through a maze, a pineapple maze that's on the pineapple plantation on the so-called country store that's in Wahiawa, around the corner from where my family live. My sister lived there, and when I go to visit, I go there every year. But I've never been to the plantation, to the maze, because it's complicated. It brings up a lot of feelings. So yeah, this piece of fair use Hawaii, you know, I was trying to think about like, what is it that people, when they're using GoPros, or they're using like documenting the land, or this in case it's a drone, like, why is that okay to take the land visually like that? Is that stealing? And is that parallel stealing to and or taking of land that was colonized? So to me, I feel like there's parallels to that. And so that's something that in my work, you know, I'm continually kind of throwing the work up against, and throwing the viewer up against, to ask like, what are these questions and how are we living them contemporarily, like right now? And so that's why I ripped this video, but also, who owns it? Did this person own it, or does YouTube? And that's the real answers, but nobody likes to talk about that because it doesn't feel good to think that your video, you don't own it, that YouTube does. But what do we do with YouTube? It's a big company, right? But so is Dole. So is the military. The US military is pretty big. And so what I found out through my research, even, you know, not just that Dole has a house around the corner from me in JP in Massachusetts, in Boston, but also I learned that the Dole plantation, that beautiful maze, the garden maze, was built on military land that quote unquote was given back to civilians, right? Hawaiians, people living in Hawaii residents, but it still has military housing, and it was based off coal. So a lot of those plants, and a lot of, I mean, they're probably it's toxic. Is the land toxic? Is that good for the land? Is that good for pineapples if people are eating them? So then, are the pineapples actually being grown there? Or are they now being grown in Philippines and being shipped back to Hawaii to be sold at the country store? It's a lot of questions that come up through the research, and a lot of things discovered that it's like, whoa, all that came from some darn token that I got on eBay.
how much was that token?
$5. I know, it's so interesting. It's like, my goodness. And I didn't know that actually that, you know, because it's thought that that land is given back to people, you know, from the, because the military using it during Pearl Harbor when they needed a base to store coal. So they were shipping and storing coal there for the ships and for submarines or for whatever it was, they were using coal in Hawaii to solidify the base. And then they gave back the land in a way where civilians could live there and there could be housing, but it actually is still used as military housing, which I don't know if my family knows. I didn't know that. Because there's another base, but it's just not quote unquote like based. But Hawaii is still 22% of the island is still used for military use currently. So maybe that brought the percentage down just a little bit, right? Like 21 point, I don't know, whatever that be.
Do you want to talk about, you know, you've been raised in lots of different places, and how has that influenced your, you know, I ask people about their art journeys, you know, like, so how has that influenced your art journey?
Well, I mean, being raised in Okinawa, Japan on a military base and then living off base and going to Japanese school for a few years and then living there and working on an island in Kumajima as like a waitress at a place called Half and Half, where my coworkers were half Japanese and I'm half Asian also, was a whole experience. But like right here, I'm just gonna share this one. So the work that I made, you're talking about the Pineapple Girl series that I had worked on initially. So this series I had started in graduate school, but I had to get a travel grant from the school to go back home. So basically I was getting a travel grant to do this work to go back home, but I was also getting enough money to go home because I was poor. I didn't have any help in funding going to school. So I had to take out loans, and then I got a travel grant to go back home. And it had been 10 years since I had returned back to Hawaii when I did this piece that you're looking at right now. And then I continued to parallel that in New England. So I was trying to find connections between New England and Hawaii around the time when this work was being made in 2011. Let's see if it'll let me. Video's very screen. And so, you know, I was doing work, my brother actually drove me out to this area in Hawaii where right behind me in this video is a military base. And so there's reasons why I picked this location. And it also was right after a big, do you remember the tsunamis that was hitting Hawaii? Mm-hmm. And so this happened shortly after that, back in that year that this was made. My brother was like, you can drop the pineapple, but if you fall in, he was like, I don't know if I can.
He said what?
He said, don't fall in. He was just please don't fall in. He's like, just throw the pineapple down and run the other way. He's like, don't fall inside those waves. Those waves are gigantic. And it doesn't look that big because, you know, the framing, the camera creates magic. And magic sometimes doesn't look dangerous, but it's pretty dangerous. And so right now you're watching the parallel of years of work. And so traveling, you know, getting the travel grant from the school as a graduate student to go back home to make this work, and then to see my family again. So that's a whole nother layer of like living in art. But then this other video here was done in New England. And this was done in a series of over a year. And so it's called 3 Seasons, Departing Tide, because I left out a season because I wanted to mimic that feeling that I had of like missing something, of missing the time, like the time zone it takes when I travel. Like I miss parts of home, I miss parts of myself, I lose time, I gain it by traveling. And also departing tide, that kind of comment on, I always feel like I'm leaving and it's always hard to return. So, you know, I reversed the film on the left side to mimic that kind of leaving and kind of not having. And then, you know, just experimenting of what it is to have my body be in New England and what is it to have this fruit, the pineapple, and parallel it with landscapes and just the reality of New England. And what is that? How does that fit together? Because there are histories and histories do fit together, but how do I do that visually? And that was what I was exploring. But also just that kind of idea of the body, of the native body, of exoticized body, of you know, of me, but also the history of what my body represents. And so kind of like playing around and trying to explore that. And so that was some of the exploration. Being born in California also has a whole other slew of historical connotations, and I've yet to be able to go there and do work. And there's a whole series I love to do that my friend Oud, who is an architect there in New Haven, helped me create a rhino version of, there's a piece that I in the future would love to work on called American Dream. And I asked my father, who's an architect and self-taught how to draft, and kind of fought against the digitalization of CAD, really struggled with that as being an older person. And that created a whole other layers of complications within like our histories, our family histories. But she produced a digital version of that, of the house that my dad, I asked him to, from memory, to draw the house that we used to have in California. And then she digitally rendered that. And so eventually I'd like to create a VR experience of that and do some what is that called? They have that geocaching. I want to bring that back, just like you would, not what is it when you have emojis, but emoticons. I want to do that kind of old school digital planting and plotting.
Why'd you say you want to bring back geo?
I want to do geocaching. Yeah, it'd be cool to do some.
People do it. People do it.
They still do it. Yeah, it's still real, but it's pretty old school. But I like the idea of kind of scavenger hunting and trying to find a place that actually exists but doesn't exist. So he did it. I asked him to do it from memory, and so it's not accurate. And so if it's accurately plotted, then it's plotted on a 4-way stop in a road, because the address was off. There was things that was off, but we just designed it from memory. So it's this kind of memory of a dream, memory of a real place, but it still becomes a dream because it's lost, because of not being taught how to solidify, how to keep value of a house, how to deal with housing, how to he should have never sold the house in California. It was right in San Mateo, close to Silicon Valley. The market value of that house is now a ranch. Somebody bought it and put a ranch on it, like a California ranch house. And so, the work that I'm trying to do references all these things, but it's how do I do that in a poetic form? And so that's the complication. That's my challenge. And how do I do it in a way that, is painful because there's personal histories, but how do I do it that a wider audience can connect to?
Well, we were talking about that earlier. I just want to say hi to Juju. Hi, Juju. I assume it's a Juju that I know. Is it? And do you not want to talk? Or maybe she's not. Maybe she walked away. Hi.
That's awesome.
So she's do you want to talk and say who you are?
Yeah, I'm Juju Harris. I'm from Oakland, California. So all the stuff you're talking about, the Bay Area, and I was like, oh yeah, home. Yeah. I'm really enjoying this very much. I had it on just my name because I'm in my kitchen and I'm watching it.
I'm kind of in a semi-kitchen. I might cut some pineapple, but either way, it's interesting how the green screen, how this can make a new world.
Yeah. So this is really, really fascinating and stuff. And thank you, Nadine. I wanted to tell you, your things are awesome. So now I'm excited about this series and dialing in. I'm really enjoying your work and all of the things you're talking about. And your idea about this idea of going back and finding a place that you think is there, but it's not there in a way. Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting because I feel that way about Oakland. I've been here. Right now I live in Maryland, just about 15 minutes from the capital. Mm-hmm. And so, when I go back to Oakland, or when I've been back to Oakland a few times in the last 22 years, it's it's home, but it's not, it's
right.
It's changing. But then I realized the place that I know, my Oakland is not maybe a generation before me. It's not their Oakland. So it's just always going to change. And this connection to home and what land means and how things have changed, my idea about Oakland has changed. So for example, I'm from East Oakland, neighborhood called Sobrani Park. And the last time I went there, maybe about 4 years ago, I saw where they had started a nursery and they were rematriarching the land back to the original people. And I just thought that was so powerful and so interesting because, you know, Oakland has this, like, my Oakland, the neighborhood I grew up in was actually built as like an enclave for white people to get away from people of color. And then, you know, once desegregation started happening, there was white flight. And then it was a pretty much Black neighborhood when I was growing up there. And now it's mostly Latino. And so just thinking about how things change, but you still have this connection and this idea of what home means.
And my dad is older, and too, so you probably even have, you know, you understand this, like my dad was older, and like, so he's 85 now, and he was born in 1935. And so my family from Hawaii, my family that lived in Hawaii or that now live there, and they came over from the Philippines in the 1920s. And then my dad moved to to California in the 1950s, I would think, probably around then. And he remembers, and this is like, I don't have a lot of stories, but he even told me, he was like, yeah, you know, when I was in California, when I first got there, I was drinking the water fountain. They told me that I needed to go to the colored fountain. You know, he remembers that. And that's something that he told me about. And I was like, and so there's complications of people, you know, that happening. And then also not even understanding, like, you know, what he is, and just like so many layers, you know. And those experiences, people having common experiences, maybe not even knowing because they're not talking about, or they can't, they're scared, or, you know, us not knowing, you know, Filipino, not being able to speak it. Ilocano is what we should have known because my grandma never spoke English. But he didn't speak it because at a certain time in Hawaii, you weren't allowed to speak any other language than English. And if you spoke anything that sounded like Japanese, even though you're American, you might have got sent to California, right, to a camp.
Right. Yeah. My husband's Paraguayan. I met him when I was in the Peace Corps. And so our children, I refer to them as Afro-Guayans or Guarani Negroes. And you know, for a long time, I mean, Guarani, the indigenous culture, was really frowned upon. Like, oh, that's only what peasants speak, and it was very classist. But at some point, there was this idea about like, no, this is what makes us. Our language is what makes us. This is a matriarchal language. And so there has been a change, and there is a lot of pride in it now. So our oldest son speaks almost perfect Guarani. Our youngest one, he's learning it, but by the time he was kind of cognizant, my stepchildren were speaking English to him. But that disconnection from something because it's seen as other or not as worthy.
Or even like depending on the country it's associated with, there might be prejudice, right? Or like a kind of classist, or I once was interviewing for a journalist position in upstate New York. I won't name the school, but there was a professor who was like questioning me, and on my resume or on my website, I had mentioned the Ryukyu Islands that I had been raised, and I had, you know, and I did it in a poetic way, the way I talked about it, but I mentioned Ryukyu Islands, and he was like, oh, he's like, that's interesting that you're referencing Okinawa as Ryukyu. And I was like, well, it is. It's the Ryukyu Islands, and that's how we talk about it in Okinawa. And he was like, oh, and kind of, I was like, well, is that what you want to talk about right now in my interview? You want to talk about the politics of Okinawa? I was like, we can do that. And he was like, oh, no. But, you know, that attitude and him flaring up like that and throwing it at me was, you know, it was something that it was a prejudice, right? And it's interesting because in Okinawa, when I was growing up, a lot of my friends were half, you know, mixed race. We all spoke Japanese, or like a combination of Japanese, English, and other said language, depending on which friends I was hanging out with. But a lot of the young people were bringing back Hogen, which was originally spoken in Okinawa, not Japanese. And so not a lot of people like to talk about that, or like to, like, you know, Japanese people may not want me to talk about that, just because it brings up complicated relationships of like, why is Okinawa, and like, why is Okinawa an entirety of an island given to the US government as like a truce, as like a bargaining chip, right? And so it starts getting complicated when you start referencing things by name or by its original name. And then we also have that here in the US, in mainland here, because you know Hawaii's US, but it's overseas, but here. And so, and then also the Philippines, you know, like an island who is also used in Guam, you know, as a bargaining chip, as a jumping stone for Air Force, so that they can refuel, so that they can have a place to keep things, more storage, right? Almost like storage units, or training places to, you know, try out bombs. You know, if I don't know, maybe I should stop saying these things, but
No.
it's all,
whole lot of ding dong nerves. So I feel it. I'm gonna
part of the experiences. Right.
do off video because I'm still cooking and my husband's watching.
It's so good to connect with you. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, if you're ever in the area, come stay. Oh yeah, well whatever. COVID. Okay, I've got a warm greenhouse where I can put in a nice cozy bed. All right. I love you, Nadine.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye. That's great. I love it. Oh, we have so many people joining us, and we have all these other people that I can't see on Facebook because I'm not in there. So we'll say hello to them.
Hi, Lori. So I hope I don't look distracted, but I'm listening and I'm on Pinterest doing my boards. I don't know if it's interesting to show people.
Well, it'll be good because later people can look at the pins and be like, oh, that's what Nadine was doing. Oh.
I know. Rose, I was talking to someone, I feel like I have to get another computer. So when I do these type of things, I can have my computer so people can see it more than this stuff.
I know, I like that. That's really cool. Oh my God, I love they have the multiple cam. I tried doing that at another thing and it got really complicated. And then I have a back screen, a screen, and back of the screen, another screen. I was like, oh my God, there's too many screens.
Well,
like Soleil mirror.
Well, Soleil runs it, even though she ran away. And I don't think she heard Juju on the phone. And I was trying to see if she would talk to you, but you know, she's a young woman now.
Oh, she's growing so fast.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Speaking of growing fast, youngins, it's like my nephews who live in Hawaii, they're so sweet. I have one, it's Josiah and Asher, and the younger one, he's like just turned 5, and he's just like, when are you coming to Hawaii? And I was like, I can't, it's not safe. And he's like, well, why don't you just drive here? I was like, I can't drive there. I was like, I live across the ocean, like the ocean and the ocean and more ocean and more ocean. I just keep saying ocean, but she's like, okay, stop talking. He's like, it's fine. Okay, I get it. It's far. I was like, okay.
Do you ever want to move back to Hawaii? I always wonder, like, you know, I went there and I loved it so much. I went there for 2 weeks and I went there when I was a dean. And so every year, you know, we had different, they had a nice professional development budget, but, you know, going to Hawaii, they're like, look, unless you are presenting, you cannot go. Yeah. So it's just like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm going to Hawaii. So I wrote like the best workshop descriptions, and I got to give 2 workshops, and people were so angry about the people that went. I was just like, well, you should have wrote a description too. Like,
I'm glad you got to go. I mean, I would love to go back home. I'd love to live there full time, but the hard thing is it's hard to get jobs there.
Yeah, and it's so expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's really hard to make art there. There's not a lot of opportunities. There's not places to show it. Funding is hard. It's like, it's hard to get. There's a lot more going on, which is great. There's a lot of things. There's something going on in Maui, big art, and it's big art in small Hawaii or small island. It's like, it's this whole initiative that's happening right now because of grants that they've received. I'm just trying to see if I can, I have so many things going on right now. Small town, big art, they're calling the whole show. So you should look that up. And there's actually, it's the upcoming month. There's, you can go online and there's like a contemporary art in Hawaii summit. And there's also a biennial that happens, which is now turning into to a triennial. And so that's also something to keep on your radar of like Honolulu triennial. It's really hard to say that fast, but that's something that comes up. So it'll be coming up soon. So check that out. And at least that's like some opportunities, and that's ways if people are interested, what's going on in Hawaii, what kind of art's being shown, how are the dialogues going? Like what are the dialogues that everybody's having? That's one place to go and to see, and a lot of things are being done online. So I suggest do that now since it's accessible. You may not get to go to the island, but the question is like, do you really need to right now? So even though you're disappointed, I don't care. Because I know that my family's a little safer. So I'm disappointed and I don't care because it's like my disappointment's very minor. It's just like a piece that I made. Go ahead.
Well, no, like, I mean, that's like what,
people,
you know, people are going down to Jamaica and because they're like, oh, it's only, you know, $300. And I'm just like, and they're like, but they don't right now. Like, I mean, the Caribbean, they did a really good job of keeping it away. And I understand that you need money, but if there's an outbreak, there is no way to handle that.
Right. That's the problem. Ireland is hard.
You know, like other people might be able, I'll be able to get airlifted. I'm Canadian. I can get airlifted out if I went. But other people, you're not going to be able, and they're not going to be able to handle that. Like where my family lives, which looks like right across from where you are right here. You know, you just look at the water in Jamaica. But when my grandmother had a heart attack and like we went to go visit her and we were just like crying because like what a hospital looks like. I mean, I'm Jamaican. I love Jamaica, but I would never want to be sick and be in a hospital in Jamaica. And the only place I'd want to be is in Kingston. And even then I'd just be like, can you just send me home right now, being America?
It's hard.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's just like living, you know, it's hard. Like everybody has to depend on each other, everybody being the family, or if you hopefully have good friends. If not, then be careful who your friends are. It's like, it's tricky because like people have to live in a small unit, in a small apartment, and there's many, many people, you know. It's like where laundry rooms become a room for somebody who's like a teenager, right? Like, you know, rooms that shouldn't be used for housing or shouldn't be used for people have to be because you can't afford not to. You know, elderly living in, you know, like strangers' homes because they don't have enough money for retirement. Like they're living in like, you know, like a garage, like a storage room, like something that you would like a little shack. It's heartbreaking.
It really is.
Yeah.
I'm glad that my family, we have a family house, and you know, I tell my cousins, there's 2 cousins that live there, and I don't know, did your family grow food? Like, you know, it's interesting how so much food is imported. I'm sure, you know, so much food is imported to Hawaii. And then I thought that I wanted to go back and live in Jamaica. And I feel conflicted because when things like, you know, a pandemic happened and like in Puerto Rico, like just being shut off from food sources and how.
And the natural disaster is making it even harder to survive and to function.
Exactly. And you know, my cousins don't grow food and my uncle grows food, and I go over to my uncle's house every day when I'm there because I love to hang out at the farm, and he has like a herb garden that will like have 30 herbs in there, like, you know, 5 million types of spearmint and peppermint. And I said to my cousins, I'm like, we grew up growing foods. You can just like throw the seeds out the window and like the stuff will grow, and they don't. And I'm like, I can't believe that you want to you go to the supermarket and like people are like, why don't you live in Jamaica? It's like, you know, certain things are cheap, but food is so expensive. And then if you have a natural disaster and everything's wiped out, then you're spending so much money on food.
Right.
Like 2 bags of food will be $100.
Well, I mean, some of my family grow things, you know, different stuff, but the problem is having land, right? Like land's expensive. Like, even though you may be from the land doesn't mean you actually have access to grow on it. You know, I know an artist, Gay Chan, who did guerrilla planting in areas to try to make a statement of like, you know, we're guerrilla planting these plants and these native plants on land that's private property, but who owns the property? And like, why can't we just use this to grow food? And why is it illegal to do this? Why is it illegal for me to guerrilla plant this native plant here on this land because somebody else owns it? And they're talking about areas that's like closer to Diamond Head. So it's like really controversial, you know, the area and how hard it is to buy land and like the market value of that land. But my family, you know, they do fishing, they fish, they dive, deep sea dive, but that's also dangerous, right? There's like these elements of danger, which is, they don't think about it because it's like part of, and hunt boar. My family hunt boar. But then there's also something beautiful that happens with that because it's like there's a relationship. Like my uncle Nate, you know, he goes and he like feeds the baby boars. And then there's been controversy of visitors, so like almost like tourist hunting, you know, the same way you play golf or something or surf. There's also that in hunting. People go there to hunt boar by sport. Oh, there's golf. Yeah, there it is. And you know, and how the land is then being utilized, and then how, you know, there's protocol to hunting. You don't just hunt, right? In different places, there's different ways you do it. There's different places that you go. There's like, you know, if you go to hunting lodges, if you don't know people, you don't have a relationship, then it's basically like showing up in somebody's house. And you like go to somewhere, a lodge, you don't know somebody or somebody's being disrespectful. And it's as if you're being disrespectful in their house, in their backyard. And that's where tourism is a problem, the ecotourism, because, you know, at the conference that I was talking about, that I got sent to, right, in grad school. And so one of the conversations, one of the panels was about Lost, and Lost, the show. And it was shot in Hawaii. And then after it was shot, they started having a kind of tours. They had Lost tours, right? And so those tours were then taking tourists to local spots that were in the backyard of people, like, you know, in local places. So then all these tourists were going to these local places. And when people flock to places, you know, there's trampling, there's trash, there's disrespect of how people are parking, right? And then also there's like less privacy of private land, and who then gets to have private land and who doesn't, who gets to have privacy and who doesn't. So it brings up all these conversations. I was talking about this, like questions and having conversation in the panel, and they kind of were like, who are you? I was like, oh, I live here, or I'm from here. And they're like, oh, and I was like, yeah, can you just answer the question? I was like, I asked you a legit question of certain things. I was like, it doesn't matter who I am. But if we want to go there, we can do that too. It's interesting. And then now it's Google Maps are doing that. And so then on Instagram, when you're like tagging something, so when you're tagging something at Instagram, you're stating the location, right? So geocaching, the whole thing, is doing the same thing with metadata. And then you create these links, you create these marks, you create these access points to places that, you know, I question, is it our right to go? And if it's not our right, even, is it good? Is it ethical? And it's not even like, what is our right and what can we own or whatever. It's like, is it ethical? I haven't taken ethics. I should take an ethics course. I'm really curious about like having a better way to like, you know, but maybe then it'll just be like, you know, we get too much into logistics, but maybe that's where we should lie sometimes.
Would you feel like about, I mean, this goes into like kind of, you know, reparations. And so how do you feel about that?
Well, there's a whole thing, right, in Wahiawa, where the Dole Plantation Gardens, I'm just going to show it so we see what we're talking about. Yeah. Because it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty cool just to see kind of what space is. Let's move all the way down. It's a little laggy. There we go. So this is the Dole Maze, Garden Maze, and this is in Wahiawa. And so Wahiawa is like where my family lives, right? Like their house is over here around the corners. It's called Whitmore Village. And so this location in 1988 was also military. So it was used to store coal. And so now it's this maze. And so then the land was given back, right, from the military. So that was a reparation, right? The military, the US military gave back the land. But who did they give it to? Dole built this gigantic maze on this land. So they give it to Dole, who has its own issues, right? There's a whole history of Dole and Dole plantations. So why is that okay? And then they gave it back, the housing, to civilians, but technically there's military housing there. So is that reparation? I don't know. I just, you know, these questions, there's lots of questions.
So, well, there's a lot of, you're talking about intersections between the Philippines and Jamaica, and it's like, you're talking about the wild boar. And so, like, jerk pork comes from the, escaped slaves from Jamaica, enslaved, that they ran away from, the ocean. And then when you see like where, because they have a festival up there, and when you see like how far and like you go like this in the car, then if you go down, you're like, they went from down there to all the way up there. And it's like, you can't, I'm like, I don't even know how they did it, because just the rock and all that kind of formation, like, my gosh. But we have wild boar, and jerk comes from seasoning up the boar and then cooking it underneath stuff. So then
it's like a clue a pig. We had the same, and that's how we always did in my yard. Like, we literally in the yard, they just make a pit and they will put sticks and then put them in there with the tea leaves and everything.
And so like the
fantastical thing is because it tastes good.
So I don't know if they did it like the same reason, but they did it like doing that so the British wouldn't be able to see the smoke, and so they wouldn't be able to catch them up in the hills. And so the preservation, all that hot pepper and all those seasonings were help preserve the food.
So smart. But then how scary, right?
So there's that. And then also like with the rum and the trading, and
we talked about how I want to learn more about the connections, and like because I'm in Boston in JP, Jamaica Plain, and there's so much rum history there, and Jamaica Plain, like I was like, oh, that's a very interesting name. I was like, that had to come from somewhere, but I don't know yet. I don't know, but I would like to learn, and I feel like it's my responsibility because I live there.
They have all those beer barons too. So they had like former beer barons. So a lot of those big houses in Jamaica Plain and Roxbury were former beer baron houses. So I don't know about the rum history so much about Boston, but I know like Gloucester, Marblehead up there, and then also in Providence, not Providence, Newport. Like Newport, they have a lot of that money comes from sugar or rum or like the trade. So like when people say that, they didn't have slaves, but they did commerce, like where like they it's like they were part of the chain, like the
what with the plantations, right? Because the plantations, or that kind of way of like getting a peoples from a place and then taking their like identification, like and on the plantations they were given these like tags, number tags, and so their identification, their paperwork was taken, and they were giving these identification tags. And then like I was talking to my partner, there's also like the buying from the store, right? Local stores. So it's all like within their own commerce. So it's like the money they're making is giving them back to the people who are like, so it's like what is that? What is that called? Like it may not be called slavery, but there's some ownership happening there. There's control. And like
I mean, I don't know if it is, but it is like we just have different names or different, like the school to prison complex, or like whatever. It's like if we're not
again, that tree comes out and it has those connections, right?
And that if we're not creating places where there's liberation and people feel good, we shouldn't be creating institutions of torture, and then we shouldn't be, schools shouldn't create a pipeline to prison. Schools should be.
Why is there commerce in prison? Why can they use people in prison for labors?
Yeah, exactly.
Who's making money? Who's making money off of that? And why is that okay?
Exactly. And then you were talking about like, how do you, because I struggle with, and that's why sometimes I, stay in my lane about like doing things of like beauty and all of that, and then talking more about
a crazy driver. I do not stay in my lane. I go all over the lanes. I'm a
no, I know, no, but I'm just saying that I but like, like trying to figure out. Well, I guess I'm like not trying to get people mad, like so doing the triangular slave trade. It's like, no, I don't know if it's like not getting people, well, it's also like, I mean, certain aspects that I gravitate to are the, like, okay, we have slavery and it was an awful thing, right? So, but then what are the things that came out of it that there's jerk, you know, there's so many different things that, you know, like if we didn't have travel, you know, like tomatoes came from Latin America, you know, and came over to Europe and stuff like that. So
pineapples weren't from Hawaii, they came from the Amazon.
Yeah, you know, so it's like all this travel created cuisine, created, you know, you're talking about your, you know, fashion, artwork, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I just like finally for the first time ordered piña silk.
Yeah.
And so it's like a huge thing. A huge thing of this whole in the Philippines. Yeah. And and it was like really hard to get it right now because it's so, you know, it's like the pandemic and like, but it's the best time to buy it because the vendors there, they need the support, you know, they need that, even though it's like marked up and higher, like I'd rather pay that and then try to like give to an organization that's like, oh, here's a donation place that will help, you know, I could actually help the people making the traditional goods that's a part of my culture. And, you know, and I'm paying somebody in New York to be the middleman, but that middleman is creating business for these other people. So it's like, I don't want to cut him out either. So it's like that. And there's also technicalities of buying as a sole independent artist within the US, right? And we saw in the last administration, that whole thing of like keeping everything in the US and some laws that were going to be passed. How would that affect Hawaii in places where it's the US, but it's overseas? You know, there's all these kind of things where it's like, there's a reality of like, you know, me learning something like that and being like, oh, that's messed up. But I'm like, oh my God, my family, or oh my God, like my friends, or oh my God, Hawaii. Like, you know, there's that reality of like, oh shoot, like this is bigger than that. And like, how is that forgotten? But I won't go into that too much.
So what do you want to go into?
So it looks like we have another hour. So, I mean, we were here to talk about process, and this is all part of my process, like all the research and all the things that I you know, think about. I don't know. I talk really fast, so I probably just smushed everything in one hour, which I think I did. But
well, also, I mean, also people, they make art, you know, like you can, you know, make something, you can, you know, can I have a little piece? We have some seaweed.
Well, what we can do is we could, you know, because I do want to like do a kind of like semi-performance, but it always depends on like how it feels. Is it the right time or place? But what we could do is I could show a video that I've been working on. Okay. And this is called Fair Use Hawaii. And this is one where it has the video that's behind me here. So let's see if I can get it to, let me see if I can find it and make sure it'll work. I'm a little bit worried I'm playing video because like the whole lag thing, you know, it's kind of like hard sometimes. It like stops the whole, it may not play smoothly is what I'm trying to say.
Well, it doesn't hurt to try.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put it directly on my desktop just to make sure it's not gonna like lag. Let's see. And maybe if I do a smaller version, it might be a little happier. Okay, so share. Let's see. Let me open it up. Everything is so particular in process, but that's good because that means that it will hopefully do what I want it to do. All right, so let's see if I can share this. And so this is Fair Use Hawaii. And so this is one of the videos that's being played right now at the Duty Free Paradise. Can you all see that? Mm-hmm. Can you also hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
And so, let's see, can you hear the video or is there music? Is there music playing?
Yeah, I can hear the video and I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, because I just want to make sure I remembered that I had that little box checked. So this is Fair Use Hawaii, and in this piece in this piece I'm using a light boxer, which is one of those pandemic phenomenons of what is that called? people with mini funds here in Boston buy them for their home gyms. So they're able to have gyms at home. It's that unit in the back of me, that big black unit. So startup thought it was a good way to get people fit in the pandemic. But I used to box when I was in Okinawa. When I was in Hawaii. I used to box at the Waipahu gym. And so that also is a really specific place. And the Waipahu gym has a lot of history. And I didn't realize how important it was for me to be doing that at the time when I was in high school, because then kids would find out that I boxed at the Waipahu gym and they wouldn't like pick on me or pick fights because they kind of knew me and my niece to do that. But
where'd you go to high school?
Huh?
Where'd you go to high school?
When I was in Hawaii, I went to middle school in Waipahu, and then Waipahu Middle School, but then I also went to Waipahu High School, which was the same high school that apparently The Rock went to.
The Rock also went to high school, I think, for 1 year or so in Hampton High, too.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
I went to Hampton High.
It's like such a, like in the ties, because I lived in Hampton, like for how long? It was like 2 years, 2-3 years. Oh, it's so funny. The things we keep learning, right? But yeah, so this piece, I kind of bring that experience, the like actual personal experience of, boxing, also this idea of kind of like fighting or kind of like the anger, like the emotional part. I'm bringing that to the table in this video. But I'm also wearing a dress that I wore in my niece's wedding when she had gotten married. So that was like, I think I was 16 when I first got this dress. So it's an actual dress that, we bought for a reason. Like, I'm not just wearing this as a costume. And I am for this video, but it also was used for something, like it's a real dress. So in my work, I'm trying to find ways to make real connections with my own diasporic identities as an Asian American, but also to connect back with people are still doing in Hawaii. There's cultural references here that are also more complex with stereotypes and other things of such. And there's a green screen. Green screens are all famous right now, right? I have one right now behind me. But that's what I used to key in the ripped video, YouTube video of the Hawaii drone video. And so what you're seeing there is like, this one actually is, let me see. So that one, let me see if I can stop that one really quick. So this one actually is a video without the green screen being keyed out. So actually, let me see if I can show you both. Sorry, I have like multiple.
Now I can hear the audio of the video, but okay.
I know. It's like I have to have it playing to share it. So let me see. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to show a little bit of this one. And because you won't see this ever because I'm showing the process. So I just want to show a little bit of this. Okay. And then let me go back. And let me get the other one up. And let me show you what the actual piece looks like. So I think it's valid to also show like what it takes to do these videos, and also that I'm doing them in one place and then doing them and then like bringing in this other world, right? And how I'm trying to parallel these things and use technology that we're all using right now on Zoom. And so I was like, this is a perfect time for me to use this because people have so intimately had to use this if they love or hate it or whatever it be, that now they understand too how this works, right? And how either tricky or painful or annoying it is. If you move too fast, you get that green in between, right? Because the key is like failing. So let me bring in the video.
What is failing when the green is?
So the key is just not, the program is not reading the area outside of me that isn't green. So it's failing to pick up that difference and to convert it into a graphic effect.
I tried to just use a piece of green fabric behind me and it didn't work. Sometimes,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like too green, too evergreen.
That is a thing too. No, that's totally real. So the reason why like I also showed the other one first. I want to show process, but it's like I have to make that video to then feed that into, I just want to hide that so it doesn't get confused. So that I have to feed that video into After Effects, which, since we're talking about process, after we're done showing this video, I will show you what that looks like, the screen that I work with to create this. Let's see if I can share this. It's funny because then I end up with like multiple screens. It turns out to be so meta, which is a whole other experience. I can't even find you all now. Now you're all layered in this other world that is now the digital space. So if we can talk to, so I can try to find you all again. You're like layers behind. Can you still see me? Can I see you? So I've lost you all. So Nadine, you have to talk because I've lost you.
I can see you.
Yeah, I can see you.
You can see me, but can you see am I sharing the screen?
No, the screen is not being shared.
Yeah.
So what happens, Zoom just made you all small and made you all disappear. And so I'm like, no. So now I know that's a thing, to kind of get the screens if there's too many. I mean, I'm still learning because all of this is also new process and new media. Like I just updated Zoom. So now it has all of these new properties that I have to get used to. And I'm not ashamed to admit that I don't know, I'm learning it too. So let's put this one up. Hopefully it's the right one. Turn down the volume. And so it starts out the same way. And I wanted there to be the reference of the green screen. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna speed up a little. We're gonna go past this part. Oh. Okay, so I'll let it go through what we've already seen just because I want it to transition in a certain way. So what happens is I turn around and I go up to the light boxer. I change the music. And then there's going to be the green screen shift right there, right? And so that didn't happen in the other video because it wasn't quite composited. But there's something that happens right here that a lot of people are aggravated by, that you can see the background, but you can't see me and that I'm out of focus.
Yeah.
So in video, that's a no-no, right? But I do that on purpose. It's not by mistake. I do that on purpose because I'm trying to control the view of the viewer. I'm trying to control what is real and what isn't. I'm kind of trying to control the view of what is exotic or what you might want to see, like my backside, and I'm not letting you. So there's these kind of layers in the work that I'm trying to have these dialogues of the things that are coming up while I'm doing the research. But at the same time, you know, there's also, I have the need for referencing it back to Hawaii, referencing it back to the experience of, you know, fighting, war, military. And so all of this parallels with that. And in the background, right on the left side, there's a necklace that my brother gave me. It's a Puka shell necklace. So those are all shells that are found on the beach, and my brother gave it to me. So it's dear to me. And then there's a piece there that was also made by a local artist that later I'll have on my website. I'll have all the names and the links, but I'd rather do that so I don't communicate anything, especially bodies of work that is connected to. Yeah, so then there's some focus just because I don't want it to totally be out. Like there's this kind of layer of going back and forth between what's seen and not seen, what's real and not real. And then the song Aloha Oi is a song that Lani wrote before she had to step down from power when there was the coup in the 1800s. And she did that one in, I'm trying to remember now, I think she did that one in the 30s, if I'm not mistaken. But the one that you hear now is by a German group that they actually had some Jamaican ties. And it was really interesting because they the whole album is about Jamaica, but then they did Aloha Oi, they covered that. And so it's supposed to be like tropics. So there's like this whole, like, you know, kind of messed up compilation of like use of tropics and tropical sound. in music. And so I started out with that because I wanted to have a real reason to kind of want to hit the machine. And kind of like is really aggravating, like the whole, you should see it, Nadine, you should look it up. I'll put on my website the references to all the different songs I use and also the video that I ripped it from. And so that'll all be there. But the songs are pretty interesting. And so this one is Elvis, this music. And so this is when Elvis did the Blue Hawaii. So there's all these kind of references to like audibly to that kind of history that come on top of or underneath crazy life experience with a keyed out or keyed in Hawaii, made by a drone video off the internet on YouTube. So I'll stop it there. Yeah, so there's that kind of the work that I'm trying to make and to talk about all the things that we just discussed. Like, how do I create a world where people can come into it and they don't feel totally alienated or intimidated to come to, even though it's a light box, they're still kind of like, what is this person doing? And it's a machine, so it's not like I'm hitting a person or a thing. It's like I'm hitting a machine, and it's made to be hit. So I felt like that allowed enough access and a safe place for the viewer, because I'm not interested in creating an unsafe place for the viewer. I'm interested in creating tension. And you know, there's a whole performance when the world is safe again that I'd love to do, where I chase the viewers out of the gallery in a way by actors who are hired will have militarized suits, like maybe pineapple pattern or tropical pattern. They push everybody out, you know, just so that then the rest of the piece is viewed from the window from outside. So just kind of creating layers of conflict or layers of tension, but in a way where it's still like associable.
Well, that's what I like. I would like to get into performance, because I think that also, or just like the activating my dinners, like where it's more interactive, and that there's a group on Facebook that I was part of, and I wish I would have taken screenshot the conversation, and it was about Maggie cubes, and like people are like, oh, you know, Maggie cubes like used in the third world in Africa. They were talking about Africa, and it was just like, Nor uses Maggie cubes, like
right.
Campbell Soup uses you know, like uses MSG and all that, like, you know, like
what's Spam is thought of that like way, you know, and it's like everybody eats it all the time in Hawaii. It's like, no, that's not just ate during the war, and it's not like what are you saying? What kind of stink are you talking about? Spam?
But then you have Spam, and then people are only like Spam, but then there's Vienna sausages and, you know, bully beef and all these things.
I grew up in Tennessee, and I ate a lot of Vienna sausages. I still love them. I mean, I don't buy them all the time now, but I like, no, there's like an endearing quality. I like it. They're so cute.
Oh, girl, I'm sorry. When
you put barbecue sauce on them.
When we first moved to America, like my aunts, I had like 3 aunts that moved from Jamaica to America, and then we moved from Canada. So my aunt, so it's like all these people living in a 3-bedroom house. And so like my aunt had sponsored all of us and was taking care of all of us till we got on, you know, my mom and her sisters got on their feet. So we would have like ramen, and I didn't have hot dogs for the longest while, because the way hot dog cuisine, we had regular hot dogs, then you had sweet and sour hot dogs, then you had stir fry hot dogs, then you had barbecue hot dogs.
That's in Hawaii.
I mean, it's just like I didn't have it. I swear to God, probably for 10 years, because I was like, if I have another hot dog, and the same thing with Vienna sausages and Vienna, I never again.
I know. Like, I actually got the same way with it was a combination of Spam, hot dogs, bologna, and fried chicken, because I used to make a lot of fried chicken in Hawaii, and pork, and just like all kinds of ways of pork. I just had to take a break, but I was just like, I started missing it, and I'll do that sometimes. And if I go home, I eat too much of it, and I get kind of my stomach, because I eat a lot.
I don't know if you know Jamie Sunwoo, if you ever came across her. Like, she went to Yale, and she's Korean, but she was on here, and she does. I'll hook you guys up and give you guys each other's information, because she deals with identity and food around Korea, and like just a lot of things that you were talking about today, like, you know, the army base and like American.
Well, it's complicated. Even like being raised in Japan, there's like Korea, you know, has a complicated relationship with Japan, and it was always really hard because, one of my best friends, like she's Okinawan and Korean, and she lived on a military base. So it's just like, I can only imagine, like, in the identity work, like it's a lot.
Right. So she does stuff around spam and performance and all of that kind of stuff. So when she was on, because we talked about collaborating, and I don't like spam. I really don't. But
there's so many ways you can make it.
No, well, I know, and I did. You know what it is? It's like the texture, and like when you've grown up on bully beef and those things, like and you had them for extended.
There's also the can. Was it corned beef? Oh, I didn't know you could buy that not in the can. I actually didn't. I didn't know. I didn't know you could buy corned beef outside of a can.
Right. So I'm saying that I grew up on that. So we have corned beef and cabbage.
Yeah.
And so we never had spam, but I didn't really like spam. But I made.
I'll show you some recipes.
No. She came on, and so I said, let me, in her spirit, let me, experiment. So I made these really good spam and kimchi and cabbage dumplings.
Oh my God. I've been making so much kimchi during the pandemic. Literally the first week I signed up for a CSA for Bedfire Farm, and then I made kimchi because it was like the smell, and the visualness. It actually is like, it feels so good, like just making it.
Doesn't it make your stomach, and don't you feel better eating it?
Because at first you get that mix up, right, where your body's acclimating and doing the things it should. And like I always think of it as if like the kimchi's in there having a party with all the other organisms, and I'm like, oh, they're having a party, and there's like woo, and then eventually everybody like knocks out, and then they wake up the next day and they're like, all right, let's like get back to work, let's drink some water.
So I made so they liked them, and they were really good because the kimchi and the cabbage, and I put the Korean spiced the dry pepper, and so they did taste good. And I cooked the spam, like I got a little crust on there beforehand, and then
so you all collaborated. You collaborate together on this.
So while she was talking about her project and what she was doing, she was making that, she was painting, I think, or drawing. She was drawing.
That's really cool.
We're just talking, so while I was cooking and making it. So I made 3 different types of dumplings that night.
So, that's nice. I miss your dumplings. You cook so well. I miss your cooking. Every time you come to an event or we just get to see each other, there'd be some kind of, we go to a good place to eat, or like, I miss that part of things.
So how do you like, I do too. How do you like, how do you like Boston better than New Haven? Is that a bad question to ask? I know you.
It's kind of a weird one, right? It's like, do you like Converse or Nike? It's like, I don't know. I mean, it depends on, is it pump? Is it like, I don't know. Is it like flat classics? Like, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I have a heart for New Haven. I mean, honestly, it was hard as an artist, as a performing artist, to really make it there. I didn't get a lot of funding. And then ironically, when I left, I got a lot of emails about some grants that opened up that were on pause for like a few years. And I was like, yo, I'm out. I was like, I'm not there anymore, so I can't apply anyway. But once I moved to Boston, like I've actually had a lot of like opportunities for performing, but then a lot of support. Luckily, I was able to get the Live Arts Boston grant with the Boston Foundation, which is what allowed me to make work this last year. And it was like life-changing because like, one, it's a pandemic, but 2, like I just never really had funding like that for performance. So then I was able to hire the costume designers, like the garment designers, Jason Lin, and I'm working with another artist, Tim Manalo, who is in Canada, but also works in Boston. And like, they're young artists, they're trying to, so it's like, it's for me, I see it as too, it's not just like funding me, but because I'm a performance artist and I do video, so there's videographers I can hire, and who, one of my roommates, I was going to hire her to do like documenting because she's a professional photographer. So it's like, when cities and organizations or anybody who has funding, like the power to have money to give opportunities, well, cities trust organizations then to give them to the artist, right? Because there's a whole system, because we're a capitalist, right? So it's like, if you trust artists and if you just let them do the work, like trust that they will then hire other artists and other people they're collaborating with. And to me, that's the world, because I was able to then expand and just survive. And so that's been really great. So not about not liking or this or that, but just like being able to survive. Like it was really hard to do that there because I didn't get a lot of funding for performance work. And I didn't have a lot of safe spaces to do it either, or ones that like harbored kind of like, well, I say safe space because performance is vulnerable. And also the support isn't just money. Like you can give artists a room that has mics, speakers. Like, you know, if you're not giving them funding through the city to have money to do that, then they have to have that, right? So they need to have a venue that has that. And you shouldn't be charging them a lot of money because the venues should be fine. You know, the city should be paying those venues that are like supporting artists to stay open. I mean, Canada does this, right? I mean, you're from Toronto, you know this. And I have friends that are from, you know, in different, you know, First Nations and not First Nations that are in Canada, they get money as artists because they're registered artists in that country and they get funding. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so nice. But it's like, you know, one day I hope that happens for us, but it's like, but I hustle. So like one of the things I learned in Hawaii was hustling, right? I'm a hustler. So I learned how to then do my Schedule C. I learned how to apply for grants, and that's part of the process. I learned how to make friends and create networks so that I know other artists, other creatives that I can hire to be part of the work. So that's all part of the process. But it's complicated when you don't really have that already done for you, like the money, you know. And then the question is, how do you then fight? I hate using that word, but it's true. Fight, work, or be made vulnerable to have access to that funding. And so it's a tricky question, it's a tricky answer.
How do you like the food in Boston, and have you found any good pizza? Do you want me to tell you some good pizza places in Boston?
Yes, because I do miss the what is that? The Pepe's. I'm that person. I used to get like Pepe's pizza with it has the clams.
The clams, yeah.
The clams, yeah. I used to get that on the to-go side because I wasn't gonna wait in the long line, and I used to get beer from the store next to it. And then I would go to Lighthouse Point because I lived by there, and I'd have my pizza on the beach. I would eat it all by myself with beer, and I drink the beer and I'd eat pizza at Lighthouse Point. That was really nice. And watch the sunset. I was like, see, I don't need to have own land. And it was funny because like behind me, like not right now, but it was kind of like this on that beach that I was at, because it was one of the public beaches. But there was like this, I don't know what it's called, that like wedding place. There's like a wedding place there.
Anthony's?
Yeah. And so it was funny because they would be having like doing wedding shoots, and I'd be sitting there eating my pizza, right, drinking a beer, and I'd be like, I'm not moving because this is public. And I was like, and I'm going to enjoy the sunset just like you're going to put it in your picture for your wedding. I was like, that's not my problem. But it was just kind of funny because I was like, I'm not moving. And then I would skip rocks there too.
Well, there's this whole thing about public beaches in Connecticut. And I'm sure like in Hawaii and in Jamaica too, because you know the beaches are technically public, but then you have to get to them, you know, like so unless you go by water, you know, but then
well, there's some points. There's like walkways. So Hawaii has a lot of these.
Okay.
Where they're like in between the houses. And so technically nobody owns that because like legally, I think they have to have access points. They can't totally cut it off. I mean, I think they try, and they do sometimes figure it out. People don't get caught, right? Because they have money to like pay somebody to not go there, or whatever. Nobody's gonna bother them because they're like, well, they're paying money in different ways. So anyhow, but there's ways to get there. And my brother-in-law used to take us to certain beaches because he would want to fish. He was like, really, he just wanted to fish and dive. But he was like, all right, got to bring the kids. All right, y'all got to come. And we go, and it'd be really cool because we'd be on the beach and right up above, because it would be over there by Diamond Head, right? Over where Obama's from, like all the rich people, like Dog, right? That guy Dog, there's like that show or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that, right? The Bonds Man.
I didn't know he lived there.
Yeah, he has a house up there. And so there's these beaches out over there that you can like walk to, kind of like you can park. You have to be careful because you can't just park anywhere. They might tow you, but you find there's parking and you can walk out. and you could be on the beach. And basically also too, my brother-in-law was like, well, if anyone comes by, you just get in the water and stand there. He's like, get in the water. He's like, because if you're in water, technically they can't even argue with you. And I was just like, okay, so if we had some people that they want to make trouble, we just go stand in the water. And it's just like, and then I would see other videos on YouTube where there's like some, you know, I can't remember, I saw one recently where there was this guy who like, I heard stories about like people in Florida, you know, like people locals like arguing with officials, and they'd like be naked, but they'd be in the water. So it's like, well, you can't arrest me, I'm in the water. It's just like kind of proving that point is a whole other layer, but it's funny.
Yeah, I don't want to prove that point.
That was a funny YouTube video. I don't know, even I can't remember if it was like YouTube video or story, but I like the fact that I don't know. That's the world we live in now. We don't even know if stories come from YouTube or from our brain or from a person. Is that the same thing? Is YouTube videos like a person because they get uploaded?
When I went to Hawaii, we rented a car. Mm-hmm. So my friend and I, we went, it was right before Thanksgiving. So I arranged that I could go a week beforehand so we could have like 2 weeks out there, you know?
That's a good amount of time. I mean, if you're going to go, it's good to go.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, I haven't been back. Like when you're going to go 10-hour flight.
I mean, I go back for that long to stay with my family. Like I go as long as I can. Yeah. And people are like, oh, you're going that long? And I'm like, yeah, I am. I go once a year.
Well, I mean, I would have wanted to go for more than 2 weeks, but I was working, and like people were mad that I got to go early.
Same. Yeah, that always happens to me every year at work. And I was like, do you know when I scheduled this flight for December? I was like, I scheduled that in July. And that's even like, that's the cheapest, like the earliest I can get it. And if I don't get it that ahead of time, it's too expensive. It's like $1,000, which if I get it earlier, it's like between $690, $700, which I, you know, have debt for some of those flights.
But when we went to go rent the car, they're like, well, it was like a mid-sized car. They're like, well, you could get a Mustang convertible. I was like, well, does it say that on the receipt? And they're like, no. I was like, okay.
But it's just so funny. It's just so funny, right? I love it.
And so like we were just like driving around with the, you know, the top down and just like your hair going. It was just like great. And it was just, it's like if anyone knew that we had like, that's like, oh great, this is wonderful, you know. Did a great presentation.
You gotta hustle. You gotta just take it as is. It's like, well, you didn't ask, or oh, it is.
Well, the business office was like, well, you've had this car, and I was like, well, did we have any taxis? Because we used one car for like 4 or 5 people.
Yeah. No, it's more. It's like more economical. I mean, you could take the bus.
Yeah,
but it does take a long time. Oh, I have done that. Mm-hmm. As a kid, I took the bus everywhere. And I used to get in trouble all the time. They'd be like, you're late. I'm like, the bus is late. I was like, I can't. It's like, they're slow. I was like, there's traffic. There's only one lane.
Like taking the bus in Martha's Vineyard.
Doesn't matter.
Like, you can do it, but I don't know if you want to because it's like a little long.
It's long. So, yeah. But I mean, as a kid, I was like free, and it was great because I could just like, you know, read. I could just like chill. But it was like I always got in trouble because they were like, well, you should know better the time. You should know the traffic by now. I was like, oh, come on. They're like, you got to pick weeds. And I was like, oh, you're just trying to get somebody to pick weeds for free because you don't want to do it. Oh, man, picking weeds in Hawaii, like as discipline is one thing, but then there's so many weird bugs and grubs when you really dig in the ground. I found so many weird grubs. I used to chase my other like nieces around with it because they were like, they would pick on me. So I'd be like, oh, hey, what will you say? I was like, look at this big thing. They're like, get away. I'll be like, ha, 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 because I like bugs. But it's kind of cool to think about, too, like the different bugs in the places and the flora. And yeah, it's cool.
I like the flora. I don't like the bugs. I don't mind like bugs. The lizards. I don't mind lizards. I don't.
Guam, there's a lot of lizards. I literally, when I was a kid, I was like, maybe we got there when I was like 4 and 4.5. But I remember like waking up in the middle of the night and seeing this lizard. I guess it came in through the air conditioning because there's like, it's really humid, you know, and it's like, there's just lots of, it's tropics. Like Guam is very tropical. And it was just so, it was like, I just remember waking up, it was dark and I could see something staring at me and I was like, and it was this lizard, a big one. And I remember sitting staring and then I was like, Mom. And then she's like, what? I was like, she's like, oh my God. It was just like so cute because it was like a big iguana.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind them. I don't like mice and little, vermin.
I was gonna take my eyes off it though. I was like, if I keep my eyes on it, then I know where it is. I was like, it ain't gonna be like in my bed.
They go away from you. They don't come towards you.
No, but I was a kid, so I was just like, I'd never seen such a big lizard in my life. It was really wild. And then the gecko, they're really cute because they make that. They have that like sound that they make when they like move around. Yeah.
You swim and do you swim and do you surf?
Well, I didn't learn how to surf because it's like really expensive to have a board, and I didn't have lessons. I know none of my family surfed that I knew of directly. They dived, deep sea dived and fish. And so I didn't. I boogie board a little bit when I could borrow boards, but I body surfed a lot. So we just like used our bodies and got like thrown up against, like we used to go to Waimeas all the time and just like body surf, which is a little bit insane because it's like there's a lot of undertows. It's pretty intense waves. But recently, a pandemic thing I did as an adult, one of my adulting things, maybe midlife things, is like I bought a boogie board from a guy in Rhode Island. But the thing I bought off eBay, but it's crazy because it came from Hawaii in the 1990s. So he got it there and brought it back, like back then, and kept it. And so it was really cool because like I the board, the type is familiar to me, and I was just like, oh, it's so bizarre because I remember growing up and I had there was that kind of board, and it's like I'm short. You can't see because I'm in this like floating world, but I'm actually not a very tall person, as I've been told in the US here in the mainland, which I think is just a biasness. But the board has to be to your waist, so it's kind of hard to like find them, here on this side, because most people are tall. So all that, I was like, wow, it feels so special. So it's kind of nice to not be able to go home, but I bought a board, and I'm gonna have to beef up my swimming skills because I haven't really swum in the Atlantic like that. I mean, it can't be that different than the Pacific, other than the horrible freezing cold.
Oh, but it's really cold, and so you kind of forget. Like I can, I think the last time, I mean, I haven't gone swimming. I go to the beach, but I don't go swimming a lot. But in Nahant, which is like right outside of Revere, it's really beautiful. And they had to call us in, like the lifeguards had to come swim out there because we were so far out there.
Yeah.
And I lost track of time, but then when I was coming back, my leg totally cramped up because it's so cold.
Oh, I know.
So, like,
well, I'm saving up.
And we're just
that's a little scary. I'm actually gonna keep that in mind because like I'm saving money. Right now, finances are scary, just generally, right? Everybody can agree. But I'm saving money to try to get a wetsuit, and I'm kind of waiting. So I was like, well, technically, I'm not going out in this cold, but I'm waiting to get a wetsuit eventually on discounts, I hope. It's just hard to like get one that like fits. But yeah, I hope to like get something that's at least usable, and then I just have to ease into it. Because it's not the same. I was like, as much as I want it to be like the bodies of water in the Pacific, it's like not as warm. At first, when I was in the Atlantic, I was like, is this broken? I was like, why did they like leave it on cold? I was like, who touched that faucet and messed up?
It's
I
so
was like,
cool.
It's so broken.
It's so freezing. Yeah.
But I think I'll get used to it. It's like, I need that. I need to be connected to the ocean like that again, especially after like, I mean, I want to be able to go back home this year, I hope. But if it's not safe, it's not right. If the vaccine isn't, distributed, as I've heard the politics of how that's being distributed, I have to wait. And so that will be one way to like kind of be close to ocean and have some actions that mimic that, right? The home.
Do you ever go up to like Nahant or Marblehead or
I don't get to go to Nahant as much, but I have a friend from California who wants to be boogie board buddies, and so they're helping find some spots. My partner has roommates that surf, and so I can ask advice, or that's a different sport, so it's like tricky about like places that are safe for boogie boards because the waves are a little bit different, but I think I'm familiar enough with it so I can gauge. And I have respect for the ocean. I don't act like as if I'm some kind of like, I have a life, I could die, and there's sharks they could eat. So it's just like, I just need to respect it and be aware. And if it doesn't seem safe or it's not right, then I need to not go that day, even though I might be excited. And I'm like, oh, I drove all the way out here. It's like, maybe today's not the day. I just sit on my board on the beach or something and enjoy it. So I learned that in Hawaii.
So you were asking about pizza. So In East Boston, there's Santarpio's.
Okay.
That's the closest to like New Haven style pizza. So it's
Really?
not.
I heard of Pinocchio's. I haven't tried it personally, but I've heard a lot about that one too. So
It's not as charred. You know, like Santarpio's is the closest to
okay.
being charred. It's
Right.
not as flat.
So that's what I need to have to compete with that style.
Yeah.
I see.
I like figs. Figs. I don't know if there's one that's open in on Charles Street in Beacon Hill.
Okay.
But that used to be they used to have one in Charlestown. I think that one is closed. But that they have a mushroom and like truffle pizza that's really good. And then what's the other one? It's on Tremont Street. They used to have a chain, and I'll think about it and get back to you.
Yeah.
There wasn't too many places.
We put the vibes out that everybody will stay, functioning.
Mm-hmm.
So put out. We put the vibes out that everybody will stay, in business. We put that out during this time. So it's like, I hope that we can still go and visit some of these places. So
I know.
like tricky right now, but there's to go. So maybe I can look them up and try to like do a pickup or a delivery or something. I mean, I love going to the Ethiopian restaurants in JP. I mean, Blue Nile and like some of these other places, like that one for sure, that was hands down. And then in Fenway.
Blue Nile has been there forever. Blue Nile has been around for at least 20, maybe even 30 years.
Oh my goodness, it's my favorite. That one is my favorite. I have to be careful though, because I don't want to spend like all my money. I just can't spend all my money on like takeout. So I just have to be like, when's my reward? When can I get it? And then May and Fenway, there's like farm to table place in that.
No, I know them. Yeah.
It. You can get to go dumplings.
Yeah.
And also there's a slew of Filipino people that are selling out of their house. And so I can buy Filipino food. I've like got it from New Hampshire. They do deliveries in Boston. So I've got my Filipino fix, my food fix. And it's been awesome just to support people making the food. And so hopefully they'll turn into businesses, and then like trying to get to the grocery stores, but I can't do that right now. I'm not really doing grocery stores as much as like CSAs. And I didn't even like Cape Ann, there was like a fish CSA pickup, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Who does that one? Is it Red?
Cape
Red
Ann.
Dress?
Yeah, Cape Ann. Okay. And Cape Ann is the area too that they're in, and it's the area, but then they work with multiple fisher companies, like fishermen.
I'll look them up. I know about Red's Best.
They deliver over in the community servings,
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so it's pretty cool. And Red Fire Farm has been awesome. They've been great. I'm sharing that now with my partner, and we'll be like picking it up next season. They were sold out the spring CSA share, and like before they even announced it. And they're like, I don't know. Good. Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy, right? But usually you can wait till January, right? And like around now, and you can sign up. But like it was already sold out.
Well, I think that a lot of people, just like you, who have discovered it, it's like it's great, and then.
Oh no, I've been wanting to for a long time, but I just wasn't able to afford it by myself. So I was like, and I just was like, there's no choice. I'm just gonna get it, and there's like real people in, and just hope to join me, because it's the best way to go.
Yeah. I love the fish shares and stuff like that too, because the fish from New England is so good.
And they'll tell you where they come from too, which is nice. Like the companies of that week, they're like, oh, this is where we're picking it up from.
So what would you like to end with? What would you like to wrap up with?
I was going to kind of do like cutting the pineapple performance, but I don't know. It doesn't feel. So it would be good to, I don't know. I kind of just want to thank everybody right now. Like, it's nice that we have a little bit of time to say thank you. Like, thank you for inviting me to be here and to talk about these things, like hard things to talk about in such a casual and safe setting. Thank you all in the digital web and Facebook for signing in, and other people for coming in through Zoom.
And thank you for making the time to join us.
Yeah, and the New Haven Public Library. Like, thank you all for doing this series. Like, I mean, I used to be involved in different ways when I lived there. I had an exhibit there once.
Oh,
yeah.
In the gallery downstairs?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's like, it's really nice to come back again in this way, even though we're all kind of separated, we're not. And so it's just good to be reminded of that, and take the time for that, to be thankful that we're still connected in different ways.
Yeah, so many things have thank you for being here. So many things have changed, like Artspace is a new executive director.
No.
Sarah's not there.
Yeah.
So they're interesting times here in New Haven.
Yeah, and then the kind Boone, the what is it? The restaurant?
Right next door?
No, Boone. Boone's restaurant.
A Bun.
Yeah, Bun.
Yeah.
His restaurant.
Yes, yeah.
No more, right?
No, well, but he's gonna do his.
Are they gonna do it out of the home?
No, they own that building, and so I just think that he's gonna transform into something else, but he's gonna do the sake.
Oh, okay.
He's gonna do the sake, and then I don't know if he,
Can you pick me up a bottle of the sumac stuff?
The what?
The sumac.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's the spicy.
Come up there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Give me a bottle and I'll pay. Whenever
Okay.
I see you. Yeah, because I've been collecting. I was in Franklin Park. We were talking about. I was spending a lot of time over there in JP, and I harvested some sumac. I'm not sure what to do with it, but I was like, oh, it's like really nice. And I've been watching it grow. Sumac's a really interesting plant to see it grow from like very small to big, and then to restart again. It stays. Sometimes it dries and it stays. And you can see it over the season. Yeah, and so he has part of it. I think it's the hot cock alcohol. That one.
Yeah.
I want to get that one.
Yeah, well, just text me. I'll be up there for Valentine's Day weekend. So just text me so I remember, and I ask him a week in advance because sometimes it can be hard. I mean,
there's so much in that it's a really special. I think it's a really special alcohol. The one that he's marked, the one he made, and there's like so many different. It's like really good for you, for your immune system. The different things that's in it. And so during the pandemic, I actually was able to harvest elderberries. Because elderberries are local to New England. Yeah. And I was in Sherborne, Mass at the time. And somebody showed me how to make that and how to harvest it. And so making elderberry wine, not really wine, but more of a tincture. So kind of like, or syrup. I don't like making it sweet. And so I've just been experimenting with that. And I'm not going to pronounce this properly, but it's the Brazilian alcohol.
Oh, I never say it right too. Cachaça.
I have a hard time with that. Yeah, but
well, it's so like their language, like Portuguese.
Cachaça. Is this right? Yeah. So that it's a sugarcane alcohol, and so I take that one and I mix that with the elderberry with the tea that's made from elderberries, and you have to very slowly pick the elderberries because the vine and any of the green part, any green and not ripe ones are poisonous. It has, so it has, what do they say? When people would poison back in the day, it's like, there's something in it that is poisonous, but it's like, I equate it with old school poisoning, like back in the day poisoning. It's like, I can't think of it right now.
Is it arsenic?
Arsenic. So yeah, like arsenic and lace. I think of that.
Yeah, arsenic and old lace is a play.
Yeah, and so I always remember because I forget. I'm like, wait, what is that called? Because we don't talk about arsenic that much, but it's in a lot of things. And so there's arsenic in there's little teeny vines that you pick off the fruit. And then, so it's a meditative experience also, right? And then you start making these berries and you put in ginger and cinnamon and cloves. And then you boil that for like as many hours as you like. I usually do it for like an hour and a half or something to 2. And it makes that beautiful, rich looking syrup. It makes the whole house smell wonderful. But then you can mix that in with alcohol if you don't want to just put sugar. So then I just kind of take that as like an old school, like it's old school cough syrup. Yeah, it's like the old flu syrup, the old flu remedy, but it's like, it just tastes wonderful and it feels really good, just like eating kimchi. And so that's
I want to learn how to make that. I want to make some tinctures. Did you forage in Franklin Park? Because I didn't do foraging in Franklin. I've never.
You have to be careful because sometimes they use Roundup. They use Roundup sometimes. I think they might use Roundup.
Oh.
So you have to be careful, which doesn't make sense, right? You're like, why do you have to do that? But
Yeah.
it's almost like a lazy way to do reading. So it's not very good for the animals either. There's so many animals out there. I've been seeing them. There's so many birds and squirrels and lots of bats, which actually would bother the bats. That Roundup wouldn't be good for them. But.
Well, next time, hopefully we'll be able to catch up because we tried to do that the last time I was there. And, you know, like I've never taken you down like Frederick Law Olmsted, those parks and like the nooks and crannies and the Arboretum, the parts
We'll make time. We'll find time.
Like in the spring.
Yeah.
You know, but it'd be fun to forage. I want to get into making, I've never done tinctures. And so I learned about like, you know, how easy it is to make them at the end of last spring. And so I want to be able to do that because it's like so
easy. I've been making lavender.
Like so important to do.
Yeah, lavender tincture and syrup. So, and some of the posh coffee places, I'd be like, well, I'll splurge on a lavender mocha. And it's just like, who puts lavender in their food? I do. I like it, but you can make it.
Yeah.
So I can't go to the store anymore. I can't go to the cafe anymore. And I don't feel safe in cafes, sadly. But I've been making the lavender syrup and tincture, because you can also, any tincture you can make to usually a syrup.
Yeah.
It doesn't last as long, but that's nice too, because you can cook with it. You put it in desserts. I put in coffee, you know.
So yeah, I made lilac syrup and lilac sugar and that, and I've made stuff with like magnolia vinegar, magnolia, candied magnolias.
The flower? The flower buds and
and they taste like ginger. So like I made a bottle for Bun. I made a bottle of magnolia vinegar. So it tastes like kind of like ginger, and then you can have the pickled instead of regular ginger, you know, pickled ginger. You can have like pickled magnolia. So yeah, I want to get into, I was telling Rose that I want to do like a program where I forage because I think it's so important, and you know, stuff is free. So
but it's like it's been life-changing for me just to have that time. Like I'm not into yoga. It doesn't work for me. I have a trampoline. I listen to like Doom when I'm jumping on it. That's what I do. And forage and like make these tinctures and cook, make kimchi. Like that stuff is what gives me my meditation. And it's so visual, especially the cooking. You can smell it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like there's something in that's like, it's just so connecting to the earth and to the place you are.
So on that note, I will say thank you.
Thank you.
You know, till next Wednesday, we have Juanita Austin from Cultured AF Gallery in New London. And do we have any more programming before then, Rose? No? I think that this weekend I'm kind of free. Yay! And
that's it. And then on
next week, Friday.
Next week,
next week, Friday, we have Make and Take Bags, where I will be showing people how to make chocolate bombs, chocolate mousse. We also have
oh my God, you all better tune into that, because I've been making chocolate during this time, and your own chocolate, it is life-changing to make your own chocolate.
So we have Erica. What's Erica's last name, Rose?
Let me look that up. One sec.
But Erica is a good friend. I never use people's last names, so I apologize. But Erica was on the original Top Chef Desserts. She does bean to bar chocolate. She's traveled around the world, and so she's gonna be talking to us also. So that is a special treat.
That is great.
And
when is that? What is the day?
Next week, Friday.
Okay.
And then we're also gonna be making chocolate with molds that Rose has made with the 3D machine at the library. So
so we've got a 3D printer and a CNC router, which is carving machine. We're using those to make forms, and then using a vacuum former to like shape plastic around that to make molds for the chocolate.
Can we what is it, request forms? Can I make a pineapple shaped one?
And then I'll do library is open again. People will be able to use
a video you send me the form, I'll send it back after, and I can do it before I send out my own chocolate, but I'll take the Friday workshop and I'll make fancy chocolate. And I could do something with it.
We'll try. I'll try and make one at MakeHaven. I'm not getting into the working the machines
I
till
love
March.
MakeHaven. That was like the last place I made something, was at MakeHaven. I made a dress.
Usually I do the show there every Wednesday, but we had a show there on Monday, and so they didn't want to go there today. So, but usually I do the show at MakeHaven, and I'm gonna start using other things other than the kitchen, and I'm gonna start doing like some sewing and stuff like that. But the bigger machinery, I'm not, because I feel like I need to go like maybe like once or like two or three times a week and invest time in that. And I don't want to do that till it's warm. It's too cold to be going outside on a regular basis, you know. So.
And to answer your earlier question, Nadine, Erica Dupre, is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, I was like, I knew it was something with D, and I just didn't want to say the wrong. Yeah.
No,
yeah. So she's great. You know, like I produced. I consulted on food conference in food festival in Jamaica, and so I had to bring talent, and so she came along with some other people that I was able to bring down there. But she's lovely, and her chocolates are talk about works of art. They're beautiful, and when you eat all of them, you don't realize you can get high from chocolate when you eat all the chocolate. It's like, especially when it's so pure.
Chocolate is very spiritual. Like it's special. I mean, that like we and in America we have access to so many chocolates, right? You go to Whole Foods, it's like chocolate, but it's powerful, you know, even though we can get a lot of it. So I'd like to see that.
Yeah, so we're gonna do that next Friday, and make sure that you reserve your make and take bag, because once people find out, you know, everyone loves chocolate. And then every Tuesday I have office hours. You can find me on the library website and make an appointment on Calendly. And I would love to talk to you about your dreams, your aspirations, you know, coach you, cheerlead, listen.
You all want to talk to Nadine. She's rad, but she also she'll listen and she will tell you. So it's like, it's not just somebody listening. It's nice because you'll actually get advice, and say we can't hold hands, but she'll be there in digital self. And that's special, right?
Yeah, we can call or we could Zoom, you know? So thank you, Lani. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you
for joining us, and have a nice night, everyone.
Be well.
Thank you, Rose.
Be safe.
Bye.
Wear your mask.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep.